Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 7, A Keith in the Night. Even as a shorter episode, this half hour and change was packed with great story that surprised me with how well it handled the horrifying ending of last episode with both humor and humanity, and still leaves me totally clueless as to how next week's 57-minute finale will end this season. So let's break down Episode 7 scene by scene for all the great details, the Easter eggs, and just behind the scenes stuff that you might have missed. Also, New Rockstars as a channel and network are doing a lot of stuff right now, but one project that I think Peacemaker viewers will really dig is our current rewatch series of the Predator movie franchise, which we are doing every weekend in the month of October leading up to Predator Badlands on November 7th. You are able to get episodes early and ad-free by becoming a channel member. Thank you so much. Okay, Episode 7 opens directly where Episode 6 left off as Chris unravels the American flag with a Nazi swastika on the blue field. Harcourt grills Chris for missing the obvious signs that they were in a Nazi world, and now in these wide shots, all the flags on the desks are suddenly unfurled, and we see the red books on these desks that were not there in Episode 6 or earlier, but Harcourt now points out that these books are copies of Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. It's Adolf Hitler's book. Last week I referenced the awesome Succession scene where Tom has to grill his network's white supremacist news anchor for having a dog named Blondie, the name of Hitler's dog, but that also includes my favorite ever use of the phrase Easter eggs.
Have you ever read Mein Kampf?
Yeah, a couple times, I guess.
Couple of times? Are there Easter eggs in there you didn't get the first time?
Harcourt also points out the giant mural of Hitler. This mural shows Hitler in front of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., with another swastika flag in the mural and a large swastika flag standing beside the mural. Hitler in this wears a red uniform with a blue armband. The Nazis typically wore red armbands, but it seems like this mural depicts an America-coded Hitler with American colors to try to appeal to this conquered nation, I guess. Now, we should note that this color scheme was also adopted by Chris 2 and Keith 2 of this reality, but not as strongly by Augie 2, whose suit is blue but doesn't have any flashes of red in it. As we learn, the father did not fully buy into the Nazi beliefs, but seems like his sons did. I also appreciate the detail that Hitler's eyes are like completely askew and bugging out. Like, I feel like whoever the poor set designer was that James Gunn paid to have to actually paint this nightmare had to get in at least one cartoony dig at this psycho. Indeed, while the camera was never pointed at this corner, it is absolutely insane that Chris did not clock this, but you know, that's a joke. It's like a Naked Gun 30 Rock site reveal. James Gunn said in the official after show podcast that it was originally going to be a rule of threes structure to make the joke, where the second example of something Chris missed was a bunch of Argus dudes with lame Hitler mustaches, and we would have cut to some guys by the copier that James Gunn and Jennifer Holland said were actors who were never allowed to shave. While Gunn removed this gag, I believe you can actually see those mustache dudes in the distant background of some of the shots, but it is hard to make out their mustaches. One detail that does not come up this episode, where Rick Flag Jr. of this universe is. Yeah, we have to assume he was a Nazi, or at least a recipient of the Nazi white privilege that the prison camps propped up in this reality. Like, sure, while there are some non-Nazis in the society, like Adrian of the Sons of Liberty and Augie fighting the authorities in his own way, I think it is safe to say that anyone on the payroll of government authorities like Argus with Mein Kampfs on every desk is definitely drinking the racist Kool-Aid. While Chris missed these obvious signs, we gotta give him credit for immediately doing the right thing now when it was pointed out, breaking up with Amelia 2 and working with Harcourt to beat up these Argus guys who are only ever nice to him. I like how Harcourt grabs this guy's arms with her variant Amelia 2, nearly getting her shot. And when that Amelia dives, we do see she's wearing a skirt. Indeed, Amelia 2 never wears pants. Harcourt kicks another guard directly into Peacemaker's clothesline, and it's just another example of Chris's surprising strength. Like, his arm is so stiff that it recoils that guard into the floor onto his head, snapping his neck, I assume. As they run out of the room, Chris, though he doesn't seem to need to, shoves this other admin guy, sending a stack of papers flying, and then another admin guy where, if you look closely, he was just walking around reading Mein Kampf. Now, all season we've been pointing out the choreography and how the Earth 2 characters seem to be making swastikas with their bodies, but after Episode 6, a lot of people were pointing to John Cena's first two arm movements as like another example of that, but so much so that Fortnite freaked out and temporarily suspended the Peacemaker emote. This was before people pointed out that these movements are essentially Cena just making a capital letter H. So Fortnite did restore the emote, which I think was the right move. Also, fun detail that I caught in research for another project, Eric Nally, the lead singer of Foxy Shazam, actually cameos in Superman. He's in the crowd of people who surround Superman after the hammer of Bravia throws him into the ground. Yes, he's the one with the completely unusual wardrobe and hairstyle. Meanwhile, the two Adrians continue to talk. Now, if you were paying close attention last episode when when our vigilante approached the Earth 2 vigilante, that Sons of Liberty Adrian was wiring together the same type of bomb that the Sons of Liberty used in the DMB in episode 3. That bomb was probably made by this Adrian. It actually might have been why it was stupidly easy for our Peacemaker to defuse. In the official after show podcast, James Gunn said that he wrote a draft of this episode that would have brought back Chakotay Uji as Myrn in the Nazi universe, depicting him as a badass Harriet Tubman leader of the underground Sons of Liberty. James Gunn's idea was if Myrn in the normal reality was actually a human who was really bad guy before that butterfly went into his head, the Myrn of this reality would actually be a really good, heroic, cool guy. Unfortunately, that subplot was removed, but James Gunn said that we might revisit this universe in the future and Myrn could still be operating somewhere in the background of it. These scenes with the two vigilantes were shot with Freddie Stroma and his stand-in Kellen Boyle. James Gunn said that they would shoot each take twice, with Freddie standing in the other position acting opposite from Kellen. Adrian 2 confirms this universe did result from the Nazis winning World War II. While that is the premise of Earth X in the DC Comics, Gunn in every interview so far just called this Earth 2, which is a different dimension in the DC Comics, but I think he called this Elseworld Earth 2 while writing and shooting this just to avoid spoiling what the big twist was. Adrian 1 says that in the normal world, the Americans won, and he's not so sure who they teamed up with, but it wasn't the Nazis.
You must live in like a utopia.
Yeah, I love how even our Adrian, despite not having as eloquent of a way of putting it as Leota later does, knows that America winning World War II doesn't mean that everything's great for everyone. Then Adrian 2 says,
Anything anyone has here is at the expense of those who are considered outsiders, forced to toil away in camps their entire lives. Well, that's whack.
Ooh, so confirmed. The "she got out" line that we were wondering about from last week actually was saying she got out of one of the prison camps, which means that all the nice homes and nice cars, all the comforts that seem to be enjoyed by all the white people in this universe come from slave labor happening in prison camps elsewhere off screen. So now we cut back to Leota mid-sprint from the neighborhood mob that Keith called in to seize her. My theory last week about the cars, including Porsches and Fords, does get challenged a bit here when the truck that pulls up is a Chevy, which is made by GM, which is an American automaker. But I guess you could say that all American car makers would have been nationalized by the Nazis when they took over every part of American society. I mean, the Peace Cycle is a Harley Davidson. Leota jumps the fence and wades into a swimming pool. The mob follows her kind of like rabid zombies. Like they're not even thinking, hey, maybe if I just run to the other side of the pool, I could cut her off. No, they just gotta savagely follow her into that water. So Judah Master helps her out.
Zippity zap, bitches!
Oh my god, he fries them all with telephone cables. You gotta love Judo Master's catchphrases, like when he said ding dong bitches in season 1, and we see one of their Croc sandals with a bubbly little swastika on it. Back at Argus, Chris and Harcourt escape by using his jetpack.
Wrap your arms around me. What? Just do it.
I love how the cool music starts to play, but then just humorously cuts off when they clumsily hurt themselves. Chris asks how big the portal is back to his world as he wants to bring the Peace Cycle back with him. Worth remembering that when Chris left Earth 1 for Earth 2, it was in his grandfather's hunting cabin. He, at this moment, does not know what door his buddy set up in another location to get the portal through. For all he knows, hey, maybe they set it up in a garage door. But alas, he doesn't get to bring the Peace Cycle back with him. Keith comes home to find Augie has tied up Economos after stabbing his hand in episode 6. Augie tells Keith that his real brother is dead and that the Chris that they've been seeing recently is from another dimension.
Keith, I never talked to you boys about this, but I saw my own doppelganger in there years ago. And there was something not right about him. Something cruel, like he came from a world that was a dark version of ours.
So at first we think he's saying the dark version of the Elseworld from his point of view is dark because the Nazis lost World War II, but this is actually just a little hint that the Augie of this universe has a kinder moral heart than the heart of the white supremacist Augie that we knew in season 1. It's really perhaps the boldest statement James Gunn is making with this episode, that the Augie of this universe was actually a pretty good guy. I don't think it's chickening out to make Augie 2 a good guy fighting back against a Nazi society. I really just think it's a reflection of how all of our political values are often reactionary to whatever we perceive the ruling elites to be in our worlds. Like this used to be a common joke in sitcoms. The conservative Archie Bunker's kids are liberal. The conservative Alex P. Keaton had liberal parents that he was reacting to. And we can definitely see in our own lifetimes, there was a reactionary liberal coalition formed by George W. Bush, a reactionary conservative coalition formed in reaction to Obama, another reactionary liberal coalition formed by Trump being in power. For better or worse, American political ideology is based less on values than it really is on, I just hate whoever's in charge. So it just seems like Augie Augie in all realities is a morally gray crank who just hates the authorities. In Earth 1, those authorities were an increasingly powerful American government that insists on being world police and also spies on their own citizens. But due to our open society and systems of elections and legal rulings, sometimes we just get leaders and policies that are beyond what we individually want. Augie 1 rebelled against all of that. But take that same rebel mindset and plop him in a Nazi-controlled, fascist, authoritarian dictatorship in America. Even if that slave labor from the camps gives him a comfortable life, Augie 2 is bound to kind of hate anyone who wears a badge representing that authority and still demand that they go get warrants and get off his lawn. That's why here he tells Keith this.
We have to get to him before the authorities do, because if he tells anybody that we have a dimensional portal in our house, we are
Yeah, see, Augie didn't tell the Argus or any authority of this universe that he has this technology. So I'm not gonna deny the racism that we saw in Augie 1's heart was his own fault, but it was certainly flamed by an anarchical distrust in whatever the ruling authority was. Economos tries to get Eagly to cut him free, but Eagly seems uninterested or just confused and brings back something birds would use to make a nest, like a little piece of string. This whole gag reminds me of Rocket and Yondu trying to get Baby Groot to help them break out in Guardians Volume 2. In that movie, Steve Agee actually played one of the Ravager captors. Judah Master brings Leota back to his safe house, an unoccupied mansion with lots of snacks. He munches on flaming hot Cheetos, an H on the end like the Cheerios. In Vigilante's house, Judah Master says,
That was the most people I ever killed in a swimming pool with a telephone wire.
Yeah? What was the second most amount of people you've ever killed in a swimming pool with a telephone wire?
4.
I mean, I suppose it tracks that Judah Master would have to have had some past experience doing that in order to quickly think of it doing it now to help Leota. Judah Master also reminds us of Leota tasering him repeatedly in season 1, so I guess you could say the electric current that she used against him, he now used to liberate her. He says,
You don't want to be a minority here, or gay, or Buddhist, or anything I am, really.
So we get a confirmation of Judah Master's sexual orientation, and it leads to this really nice moment of bonding between these two queer characters this episode. There's also this line that I appreciated.
Jesus Christ.
Him they love.
Yes, while the Nazis were all kinds of horrible, they did and do consider themselves Christians, which just shows you some of the hypocrisy there. Judah Master offers to play not Scrabble, but Scrabble. On the coffee table beside it is a book titled Hunde, which is German for dogs, with a, of course, German shepherd on the cover. Also, the Scrabble box says, if you look closely, made in China. So while the Nazis took over most of the world, I guess they pursued the same globalist trade policies that America did in the late 20th century. Years ago, I got this unexpected payment for a job I had finished a long time ago. For me, someone who's naturally anxious about money, that felt like a safety net. My first thought was, great, this will help if things get tight later on. But then a friend of mine who isn't nearly as anxious about money told me, you should splurge, buy yourself a new PlayStation. So I did. And the second that money was gone, the regret set in. I couldn't stop thinking about how I should have saved it. Instead of feeling relieved, I ended up more stressed than before, losing sleep, worrying about bills, and kicking myself for making that choice. That advice worked for him, but it created more anxiety for me. And that's the thing, anyone can give you advice, but that doesn't mean it's the right advice for you. That's why I'm glad BetterHelp is sponsoring today's video, and they are on a mission to make starting therapy easier. Unlike friends or strangers who mean well but don't fully understand your situation, therapy gives you a safe space with someone trained to help you work through what you're going through. I know firsthand how much the right fit matters. I once worked with a therapist who just wasn't right for me. Their approach left me feeling unheard and stuck, but later when I found the right therapist, everything changed, and it created an environment where I could work through my problems honestly without self-censoring. I could finally open up honestly and start making progress. That's why BetterHelp created the therapist match commitment to take the guesswork out of finding the right therapist. Instead of leaving you to figure it out alone, BetterHelp uses over a decade of matching expertise, clinical experience, and your preferences to match you with someone who makes sense for you. And if it's not working out, you can switch anytime at no extra cost. Therapy has made such a difference in my life, and it can do the same for you. So if you've ever felt stuck with advice that didn't help, BetterHelp makes it easier to find the right kind of support. You can get started today by clicking on the link in the description or by visiting betterhelp.com/newrockstars, and you will get 10% off your first month of therapy. We hear the melodic rock song of Still Pretending by First Signal as Chris and Harcourt ride on the peace cycle. Jennifer Holland said this was her favorite thing to shoot this season, and maybe it was just how fast Chris 180'd when the obvious was pointed out to him to join Harcourt and go home, but she allows herself to rest her head on his shoulder. They get surrounded by the cops, but then, boom! Augie, joined by Keith, blows up all the cop cars, and Augie mows down the fleeing cops, but notice this seems to be Augie doing pretty much all of the shooting. Keith is really just there for support, and he makes a threatening grimace to Chris. Augie says,
Will you want to live? You come with us now.
I I mean, how could this not be a "come with me if you want to live" reference from Robert Patrick's other iconic franchise? Rick Flag Sr. and Sacha Bordeaux are in an Argus storage facility meeting with the prisoner Sidney Happerson. He was one of Lex Luthor's assistants from the Superman film, played by Stephen Blackheart, James Gunn's longtime friend who has appeared in all of his projects back to their days at Troma Studios in the 90s. Flag says,
MIT super genius literally wrote the book on dimensional interconnectivity. Then he threw it all away to come work with Luthor.
James Gunn actually confirmed in the director's commentary for Superman that Sidney Happerson was Lex's MIT professor when Lex was only 8 years old, and it was Sid who invented and engineered the portal technology via the Hadron Collider that Lex uses in the Superman film. So imagine you're an MIT professor, an 8-year-old comes in, and you're like, I'm gonna follow this boy king and do whatever he wants me to do. Wild. Now, earlier this season when Rick researched portal tech on that Argus computer screen, we did see an academic report that we transcribed in our breakdown, and that, almost certainly in retrospect, was written by Sidney Happerson when he was at MIT. They walk into Lex's communication hub. This was the command center that was detached from Luthor Corp Tower that Lex and his assistants operated out of in the Superman film. Argus has taken the whole hub into evidence storage now. The guard that Flag later calls Smiley, you can totally see this guy smiling as he pushes Sidney around for the entire scene. No, I do not think this will be the DCU Joker, but maybe he's a guy affected by some Joker nerve toxin. Am I reading too much into a gag that's probably just a guy who smiles a lot and has a great smile? Yeah, probably. Flag tells Sid to use this tech to track down other portals, and Sid asks what's in it for him, and Flag says he doesn't want to let Lex down. I mean, for all the eventful things that happened this episode, I think we should acknowledge that there's still the Lex of it all this season, and how next week's finale will pivot to set up Man of Tomorrow. Sid uses the computer to track down the other portal in the Evergreen, Washington area. Now on this dashboard, you can see an area of buttons and inputs labeled Responsometer Neutralizer. All of this was really part of the equipment that the team used to measure and respond to Superman's moves, when all of this was just set up to control the movements and attack combos of Ultraman and to respond and to neutralize Superman. Sid says this about the other portal.
And it's not our tech, it's different. Ours always had a wobble.
A wobble?
An unstable connection. We could never keep it open for more than a few minutes without it collecting dimensional detritus and eventually collapsing.
Dimensional detritus, as in loose fragmented matter or debris from like decay of plants and animals. You could see this detritus as a kind of fungal yuck on the surface of the portals in the Superman film whenever characters walk through it. So Sid is now suggesting that that decay is what caused his homegrown portals to glitch. By comparison, the portal tech used by the Smith family was taken from that transdimensional alien thing that we still have a lot of questions about. My money is still on fifth dimensional imps being the answer to everything. Actually, the post-credit scene in this episode stays with Sidney Happerson and the Argus guards as Sid uses his computer to access some porn.
You may want to turn around. I'm going to use my spare time here to get back on Pornhub. I'm about to drown this whole keyboard. Okay, your funeral. Showtime.
Judah Master and Leota bond over Leota's refusal to embrace Kia's dreams of them co-owning a pet store. Now remember, those dreams were for them to do that in Gotham City. So I wonder who would be buying the most cat food from them. Judah Master says Chris has the musical taste of the next door boy from Toy Story, which is a pretty fun diss by James Gunn at the 80s rock that Chris is into, and I assume that James Gunn himself is into, being basically what we heard blasting from Sid. Their Scrabble board has some solid placements, like some basic ones of run, wigs, dog, star, but then we get some longer words that I assume were placed by Rip, including united, baseball, and now, whoa, squirmed, hitting the triple word score. Now, I love this detail because if you actually count this all up, based on the triple letter S and the double letter on R, and all of it reaching the corner, meaning it's a triple word score, if you add it up, it's a score of 69 points. We saw what you did there, James Gunn. But yes, on a more serious note, let's appreciate Leota's line here.
I'm not so sure this Nazi world is as different from our own world as we wish it was.
Damn straight.
Oof, yes, very true. Considering the way the American government treats many groups, yeah, you would hope that the differences would have been a lot more defined. Chris explains to everyone what happened and how he killed Chris too, but it was an accident. Already, it's kind of surprising to see the calm, tempered approach Augie is taking here compared to the rage simmering in Keith. Meanwhile, at the door is Larry Fitzgibbon, with Lachlan Munro returning from season 1. Remember, Detective Fitzgibbon was taken over by one of the parasitic butterflies in the first season, along with everyone else in that police department. The name Larry Fitzgibbon comes from a longtime personal friend of James Gunn's, and Gunn has included that name Fitzgibbon in all of his films, Slither, Super, Guardians of the Galaxy, and even as an Easter egg in Superman. Sadly, while Fitzgibbon returns here, Detective Song does not, because yes, this is a racist Nazi universe. Augie says Chris isn't home and tells Fitzgibbon and the other cops to kick rocks, but the fact that Fitzgibbon would need to get a warrant from a judge shows us that despite this fascist regime running this country in this universe, some elements of local law enforcement and the fact that judges have to issue warrants are still intact. Now, what the judges of this universe universe are willing to rule on. How they rule and how easy it is to get a warrant would be another question. The two vigilantes catch up with Judah Master and Leota, and we're reminded of Judah Master and Vigilante's fight in season 1, and then we start to learn Augie's political views.
Cops around here ain't innocent, girlie. Far from it. That's the first thing you gotta learn about this place.
And then when Keith said he chased Leota, Augie snaps at his son.
I saw her. I was chasing her.
Why the f were you doing that, Keith?
I thought she got out, Dad.
That's not what we're supposed to do. Jesus, haven't you boys ever learned anything?
So there you go. While Augie has been resisting the Nazi authorities and the local authorities who carry out those Nazi policies, his sons in this universe, Keith and Chris, according to Gunn, did, quote, fall far from the tree. Again, reactionary politics, as we see with the voting trends in America of Gen Z men versus their Gen X parents. Sometimes kids do just end up having opposite political values compared to their parents, especially when those kids are shaped by the worlds they were born into beyond what their parents tell them, especially if you consider Keith is in his early 50s. He is his own guy, probably influenced by his own truck buddies of his generation. All these dudes would have been born in the 70s and 80s of this Nazi world and would not have, like Augie's generation, remembered the early transitional years of whatever the Nazi takeover was in America. Like their whole America was shaped by Nazi values, whereas Augie was born into an America that still had vestiges of like what the pre-Nazi 1930s and 40s looked like. Keith wants vengeance for Chris Tooth's death, while Augie admits that the idiot son would have been killed by something or another the way he was going.
I loved him. You know that. But he had issues. He was out of control, always. The drugs, the violence.
Now, while you could say it's kind of weird to see this father not fully grieve a dead son, even a deeply problematic son, we do have to remember that Augie is hearing all of this from a person who essentially is his son, from what he can see and hear, and a better version of his son from another universe. And this is the same Augie, too, who saw his doppelganger and how dark that doppelganger was. So this Chris now talking to him is really a sign of hope for Augie, that somewhere out there, the son he was always ashamed of and disappointed of had some dice rolls that turned out okay. So I don't really know if we as viewers can really say what the proper emotional context is for Augie 2 to have in this moment. But this is how Augie 2 rationalizes this Nazi world, snapping at Harcourt for calling him a Nazi, and then giving what becomes his final speech.
I didn't create the problems in my world, Missy. I don't agree with him. I applaud you if your world is perfect and you fight every injustice you ever see. I fight the madman murderers and monsters in front of me because that's all I can control. And at the end of my life, when I stand in judgment before God, I hope that he knows that I did the best that I could and I left this world a better place than when I came.
So I guess if this nuanced, incremental approach to fight Nazism isn't enough for you, Vigilante crashes in to end the speech, stabbing Augie 2 in the neck and killing him. Chris saw Vigilante in the bushes outside the window, but had no time to warn his dad. So now it triggers his own haunted memory of having to see his own dad die, now having to watch it a second time. Keith blasts the second Vigilante and Fitzgibbon brings in the fuzz. Chris cradles his father's corpse, saying he was no Nazi, but they have to flee, nearly leaving Economos behind, which is very funny because it's the fact that Economos was tied up is why Vigilante felt justified to break in through the window and stab Augie. Now everyone's just like, forget that. This leads to a brutal firefight between the two Vigilantes and all the cops, and I love how the Vigilantes seem to work perfectly together in sync. They get the portal door open, but Captain Triumph Keith uses his jet thrusters to smash through the wall at Chris. He punches Chris in the face, and we hear some sickening cracks on these punches, and then Keith loads up his arm cannon, which we have to assume would be a fatal blow on Chris at this range, so Eagly flies up and pecks at Keith, and we hear some great squelch sound effects telling us those cuts are deep. Then Harcourt, Leota, Economos, and one of the Vigilantes dogpile on Keith, stabbing him, looking rather like the Avengers dogpiling on Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. But whereas that near defeat of the villain was stopped by a grieving, empathetic James Gunn character, Peter Quill in that case, this one is stopped by Peacemaker, who screams as this is the second time he would have to watch his brother die. Chris cries,
Everything I touch is not your world that's wrong or mine. It's me.
Oof, brutal. You gotta give John Cena some credit here. He's always been fun to watch, but he really stepped up his acting game since season 1. They retreat through the portal door into the QUC. The Vigilantes depart with just a casual wave, but Harcourt stays behind, ready to finish the job on Keith. But before she can, the cops burst in. Vigilante 2 pushes her out and does this awesome acrobatic kick to kick the door shut. Also, as I assume he's trying to dodge these bullets. But I don't have high hopes for Vigilante 2 making it out alive. According to James Gunn in the official After Show podcast, in the original draft of this episode, Harcourt did did successfully kill Keith, but now James Gunn says that the episode ends as a villain origin story for Keith, Captain Triumph. We see that look on his face as he's rolled into the ambulance, recalling that look of rage as he held Augie's body, an angry son mourning a dead father and learning the wrong lessons from it. What's more DC than that? The episode is titled A Keith in the Night, and I think James Gunn titled it that because he knew that this is Keith's Dark Knight origin story. This Nazi world was not destroyed, was not burned down or stopped. Captain Triumph can return, and I am terrified of what happens when he does. So Chris closes the portal, and I actually love this shot. It's subtle, but it starts with the doorway of the QUC on the peripheral of the door frame, and then James Gunn pushes in on the suitcase device, and then when he pulls back out in the same shot, now we're back in the Beanie Baby closet. Very fun. Outside, Judah Master goes back to side with Flag and Sasha and the Argus forces. Chris surrenders the quantum suitcase and gives the story that all the others just forced him to surrender to clear their names. And Rick Flag, while probably not believing it, is willing to buy it here. The episode ends with Chris in custody. All right, let's look ahead to the promo for next week, the season finale, an episode titled Half Nelson, an episode that James Gunn said is over 57 minutes long.
There's some people here who want to visit.
No, I don't want to see anyone.
Why?
Maybe because I'm the angel of death.
Door 22 is unlocked!
We're gonna find what we need in there. And everything we talked about is gonna come to fruition.
Do we even know what we're looking for?
Resources, new ground for overpopulation.
When has anything we've ever done actually been for the good of the people?
Wow, so the arcs that I was most curious about this season all seem to have been wrapped up this episode, and now I have no idea how next week's episode, which seems like it's going to be an hour-long preview to Man of Tomorrow, is going to play out next week. And I actually love being in the dark. So what we're seeing here is, I guess, Argus forces sending some scouts that I think include Amelia in some cases through the 98 other doors of the QUC. One universe looks like a Candyland with like a Jolly Rancher road and a windmill in the background. Then there's this other horror dimension where some kind of creature charges at them and a barn burns in the background. Is this Coverdale Ranch of another universe? Is it something else? And then we get this hell dimension that we saw in the season trailer with giant skull spiders. Now we see one of those skulls opening up with a human scream. So it seems like what James Gunn and cast members like Na Lee, who I got to talk to, they were referring to some crazy finale like this with even a lot of cameos. Like if an alternate universe Blue Beetle shows up in this series, it's going to be through one of these doors. Could Brainiac or a fifth dimensional imp by the name of Mr. Mixius Plitlick come out of one of these doors to become the villain Lex and Superman have to team up to fight in Man of Tomorrow? Comment down below with your thoughts and theories, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Penguin, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.